The peculiar Emily Valentine. Have you ever met someone so strange that they were fascinating? I have. 15 years ago, at the start of sophomore year in high school, I entered my first period, science class, and was met with relief when I saw my friend Jessica in the same class. While I wouldn't have called myself popular, I did have a core of friends that I always spent time with. There was Jessica, as I said, Celine, Lindsay, and Lizzie. The first day of school was always tough because you never knew if you had any classes with any of your friends until you stepped foot in the classroom. I remember this particular day a lot, better due to the circumstances surrounding it. We had a new student. My school was pretty small, so when a new student entered the fold, it was kind of a big deal. One Mr. Fitzpatrick stood at the front of the class and introduced the new student. I was intrigued to see who he or she was. After a few moments, Mr. Fitzpatrick had to go outside and walk her into the room, as it was obvious she was nervous. She was a very shy young woman, about 5 feet tall, with long, straight black hair that fell to her bottom. She hung her head low into her books. Her name was Emily Valentine. Emily didn't say much, but Mr. Fitzpatrick sat her next to Jessica and I because we were two of the nicer girls in the classroom. While the last thing I wanted to do was mentor the new girl, I smiled and nodded my head as Mr. Fitzpatrick pointed at her chair. I tried to make conversation with Emily, as did Jessica, but she wouldn't talk at all. It was as if she were afraid to talk. I understand being shy, but this was a bit different, to say the least. I compared my schedule to Emily's and realized that we had virtually every class in the same order. I was a bit dumbfounded. After first period science came our math class, my most dreaded class. Our math teacher, Mrs. Bautista, was the biggest bee I had ever met. She was notorious around our town, and her nickname was the Bee from Boston, as she had a very heavy Boston accent. I told Emily about Mrs. Bautista and what to expect, but she just nodded. I did not say a word. The rest of the day went pretty well. I walked Emily around the school, showed her the bathrooms and some of the chill spots during lunch. When the first bell rang, I grabbed my stuff and went to leave, but Emily grabbed my arm and stopped me. It was a bit out of character for her, but I smiled and asked her what she wanted. Once more, she didn't talk, but she handed me a folded piece of paper and went on her way. As I unfolded the paper, I read the note aloud. "Thank you." I smiled and breathed a sigh of relief. As I left school and headed home, throughout the rest of the year, Emily never uttered a word. She never spoke in class or anything, but her and I became friends. We communicated over notes back and forth and got to know each other. Right before Thanksgiving break, Emily handed me a note that asked me to come over after school for a sleepover. While I had my reservations, perhaps this would be a great time to learn more about Emily. And hell, maybe she'd talk to me finally. After school, Emily and I drove to her house. She pointed where I needed to go. What I saw was a really beaten down house with various cardboard boxes in the windows. The smell alone almost made me gag. When I entered the house, my nostrils were overwhelmed with the smell of rotting food and urine. I tried my best to hold my breath and not offend Emily, but Jesus Christ, it was hard. Emily directed me to her room, but I noticed that there were no signs of anyone else in the home. No mother, father, brother, or sister to be found. As we entered Emily's room, it was cluttered with paper plates, old food, cans, and water bottles. Her bed lay on the floor, stained with mold. She pointed at a small cot to the side and nodded her head. Reluctantly, I sat on the cot and watched as Emily sat on her bed. She lay down, turned off the lights, and proceeded to lay in silence. "Are we sleeping, Emily? Surely we wouldn't be sleeping now, right?" It was barely 4 in the afternoon. As I expected, Emily did not say a word and laid on her bed, staring at the ceiling. I sat on my cot for hours, just trying to pass the time. I started to think of ways to leave without being rude, and eventually asked Emily where the bathroom was. She didn't answer, shockingly, but didn't respond physically either. She was sound asleep in the same position she was hours ago. Slowly, I stood up from my cot and quietly made my way out of her room. I should have just left and never looked back. I really should have, but curiosity got the better of me. I started to look around the house, trying to see if I could find anything in either interesting or peculiar. At the end of the messy kitchen was a door to the right that led to the basement. To my amazement, the basement door was unlocked, and I decided to take a look down there. I know I was stupid for doing this, but I was a 16-year-old girl who didn't know any better. Looking back 15 years ago, I wish I had a time machine to prevent this. But what I found down there was something I'll never forget. The further I walked down the basement, the more intense the smell became. Urine, feces, you name it. I smelled it. I cut my nose with my shirt and turned the corner and almost shrieked with what I saw. Chained on a cot was a skeleton of what looked like a human being. The same kind of cot that I was sitting on just moments ago. I cut my mouth to muffle my screams. I went to leave the house as soon as I could. But as I went back up the stairs, I heard the door slam and the sound of the door locking. I began to panic and frantically search for a way out, but the basement had no escape that I could see. The only window in the basement was a small 1 foot by 1 foot window at the upper part of the wall, nearly 7 feet tall. Being just over 5 feet, I could not reach the window. Thinking of my feet, I grabbed the cot that the skeleton laid on and dragged it near the wall so I could stand on it and look through the window. The window was cloudy, but I could see the outside. I pounded on the window and screamed for help, but I know my cries were falling on deaf ears. I wrapped my shirt around my arm and fist and pounded the window as hard as I could until I eventually busted the glass. The window was only a foot wide at most, and a piece of glass was still attached at the sides. I summoned all my strength and tried to push myself through the window. The shards of glass were cutting my sides, but I powered through the pain and was able to stick my torso out of the window. Just as I was seeing freedom, I felt a cold hand grab my ankle. I began to scream for help, and to my amazement, I saw a man walking a dog across the street who saw me sticking out of the window. He rushed towards me to help, and I felt the grasp of the hand on my ankle let go. He pulled me out of the window, and I collapsed on the lawn in pain. Crying uncontrollably, he grabbed his cell phone, one of those classic flip phones from the early 2000s, and called 911. I laid there, completely exhausted and in pain. The man asked me what happened, but I couldn't utter a word. All I could do was cry. When the medics came to get me, they put me on a stretcher and carried me away into the back of an ambulance. I don't remember much after that. I had several cuts across my side that required stitches and staples, but nothing life-threatening. I was finally able to tell my story, the story of Emily Valentine and what happened. When the police came to question me, they informed me that the home was vacant. I couldn't believe it. Emily had disappeared. I told them about the skeletal remains on the cot in the basement, and they informed me that the remains had been taken for DNA testing. I later found out that the remains belonged to a 15-year-old girl from North Dakota that was missing for nearly 20 years. Nothing made sense to me. Had Emily done this? How is that possible? She was only a 16-year-old girl like me. Or was she? The police said that the home had been vacant for many years. When I asked them about Emily, they had no idea who Emily was. When I showed them a picture of her, no one matching that description had been reported missing at all. She was a ghost shadow. Before the police left my side, they did tell me one more detail, a detail that sent shivers down my spine. They had found jars of human tongues in the basement under a crawl space, nearly 20 of them. I never found out who Emily Valentine was or what she was, but I'll never forget that day. I will always have the scars that remind me of what could have been. Like I said, if I had a time machine, I'd go back in time and never step in that house. Once I graduated high school, I moved away for college, met my husband, and here I am, in my 30s, recalling the scariest moment of my life. I've told no one this story other than the police and a select few people, but I wanted to share my story with you. The story of the peculiar Emily Valentine. Valentine's Day is in a few days. I'm afraid of what's to come. Valentine's Day is in a few days, and I'm afraid of what's to come. I need a place to tell my story, to warn others. No one else can do anything, but maybe I can help someone else out there. And well, I want to tell my story before it's maybe too late for me to. When I first started at university, I wasn't sure how I would feel about sharing a dorm room with a roommate. It turns out it was quite a positive experience for me. There are a lot of upsides. One I didn't expect was how it would bring me out of what my parents call my shell. I was able to make friends fast, which is usually difficult for me. Katie, my roommate, has been awesome. She's chill and we get along great. Aside from her need to have a boyfriend over constantly and not warn me until I get back to the dorm, I've enjoyed my time here. Katie and her messy, hastily written notes telling me when I can come back to the dorm were the only real issue. So when I saw one taped to the door a couple of weeks ago, I felt nothing but annoyance and pure exhaustion. It was late. I had a long day of classes and then a long study session at the library after. All I wanted to do was collapse into my bed. I mean, really, it's 2022. She could at least text me. Why does she take the time to write a note and tape it to the door instead of firing off a quick message? At least I know before I get all the way back home and can figure something else out for however long I need to. This note was different though. When I picked it up, it was heavier than usual. I opened it to find an actual letter, something neat and thought out that had a small bag wrapped in lovely hard-covered wrapping. I thought it must have been for Katie, an early Valentine from her boyfriend or something. It felt intimate, like I shouldn't be holding it, and I wanted to put it back down. And I went to, but that's when I noticed my name at the top. It was addressed to me. This letter was for me, and certainly not from Katie, like I was expecting. Haley, I've been a little too shy to tell you how I feel, so I'm writing to you instead. Maybe one day soon I can do this in person, but for now I just wanted you to know that I think you are amazing. I had never gotten anything like it before. Sure, I'd had a boyfriend in high school, but that was short-lived and clumsy. Never anything like this. This was a total shock. I've gone on a few dates since I started school, but nothing more than that. And those people wouldn't be too shy to tell me anything. I had no clue who this letter could have possibly come from. There was no clue in the writing or on the letter. Nothing to tip me off on who my admirer was. It was simply signed with a heart. When I walked through the door, Katie was already waggling her eyebrows at me. She teased me with a practically purred greeting. "Hey, lover girl." Apparently, Katie had seen the letter when she got home from dinner, but she said it hadn't been there before that when she came back after lunch. She had looked at it and asked me what was in the bag. I hadn't even thought to open it. confusion and excitement still clouding my mind. I took the opportunity to open the bag and turn it over so whatever was inside would fall out into my hand. Cinnamon hearts. The spicy cinnamon smell wafted to my nose the second I opened the bag. Katie teased me a bit more that night, wondering if I'd been sent some jewellery next, wondering who my secret Valentine could be. We were both stumped. The next morning, Katie and I went to the local coffee shop like I do every morning. It had been my ritual since I started at school. I always grab a tea and a bagel. It's where we met Ted. He goes to the community college close by and works at the coffee shop. We've become friends with him of sorts. He even came over to help set up and move some stuff that didn't get shipped to me from my parents in time for the start of school. So we had to try to do it ourselves. He volunteered to help and we see him every day. This day though, I was on the lookout, my mind wrapped in the possibility of who could have sent me that letter and candy. I went to order and Ted told me my usual was already coming up. When I tried to pay him, he said it was on him. He gave me a shy smile. I asked if he was sure and he said absolutely that it was on him. On the way out, I asked Katie if she thought the letter could be from Ted. She asked how I could even doubt it after the exchange we had just had. I suppose she was right, and Ted was cute. I wasn't sure I wanted to come out and ask anyone about it though. The person who sent the letter was clearly shy. I didn't want to guess and get it wrong, make anything uncomfortable with anyone. Aside from telling Wendy, the girl I sit beside and talk to in my film class, I just ignored the letter. I figured if the person wanted to be known, they would make themselves known. I had almost given up hope when I found another letter left at the cubicle I always study at in the library. This one caught me off guard. Whoever put it there knows I study in that very spot almost every day. Was it there all day and they just hoped I'd show up and that someone else wouldn't get it? That doesn't seem quite right. I felt uneasy then. I wanted to know who was sending these letters. This one read, "Haley, will you be my Valentine?" Signed with another heart. Another bag taped to the bottom filled with more cinnamon hearts. I showed the letter to Katie. She just said it was sweet. She told me to just confront Ted the next day when I was going to see him. I told her I wasn't sure, that it didn't feel quite right to just ask someone. She brushed me off. The next day, when I didn't ask Ted, Katie jumped between us and asked herself, "Hey Ted, have you been the one sending the gorgeous Haley here love letters, and if so, would you like to go out with her?" I was mortified by Katie. "Love letters?" Ted questioned her, looking between Katie and I. "Yeah, asking to be her Valentine and stuff. You want to be Haley's Valentine?" Katie wouldn't give it up. Ted looked at me and nodded, an empathetic yes coming from him. I was shocked. I told Ted I'd text him later. I wanted to get out of there, out of such a public area. It all felt wrong, but I was excited at the same time. Ted ended up texting me first that day. He asked if I'd like to go out that night. I agreed. I figured why not? He was taking the time to make his feelings known, and he's nice and cute. I took the time to run to the store before I got ready, grabbing some cinnamon hearts to give him. It felt like a fitting present for the occasion. The date went well. I had fun. We were happy and planned to see each other again. Ted was sweet, and he confessed that he's liked me for a while, but didn't know how to tell me. When I gave him the cinnamon hearts, he thanked me, but said he hates them. It seemed odd, but I didn't think much of it. After that, I started finding little heart bags filled with cinnamon hearts in random places. One time I even found one on my pillow. I was impressed with the effort Ted was going through. We did go out a few more times. We were really hitting it off. Everyone was happy to see me hanging out with a guy, and I was having fun too. One night we even ran into Wendy and a bunch of my film class friends at a movie opening. We all sat together and talked about movies. Ted kept up, and while some of it was over his head, he still seemed like he was enjoying himself. So when I got another letter, I was surprised. Roses are red, violets are blue. Why don't you really see me when I'm talking to you? I found this one in my bag, the one I carry around with me at school. It was possible Ted tucked it in when I saw him the night before, but that doesn't make sense. Why would he do that? I've given him lots of attention, and this note has a whole different tone to it. I happened to find the letter while I was in film class. I opened it and read it thinking it was some cute love note from Ted. I must have looked concerned. I felt it too. It was an odd note, scary even. Wendy leaned over to ask me if I was alright, so I told her about the notes and Ted. She ordered this one. She was surprised to find out I was dating Ted. She agreed it was scary and maybe I shouldn't see him anymore. She seemed worried and a little angry for me, and that made me worried and angry. What was going on? I had to ask him what was up with it. I went straight to the coffee shop after my next class to confront him. I knew he was working. When I got there, he wasn't there. His boss said he left an hour before, that he wasn't feeling well. I texted him telling him I needed to talk to him. I went home to wait. I didn't get a response. I figured at first he was probably sleeping because he wasn't feeling well. Maybe he just felt bad about the note and didn't know how to talk to me about it. I gave him the night. Tried to text a couple more times but nothing. That morning I went to the coffee shop as usual, expecting to find him, but he wasn't there. The owner was again. I asked him where Ted was and he said he didn't know, that he hadn't shown up today and that he was probably still sick. Why wouldn't anyone contact me? I felt so bad though at the same time. What could be so wrong with him all of a sudden? I didn't want to be narcissistic, but the timing was weird. It didn't feel right to me. Why right after he sent that note? He was fine the night before and he had worked all day. It doesn't make sense why he wouldn't talk to me. I sent him another text telling him I wasn't mad about the note, but that I'd like to talk to him. I waited some more. Still no response. I was worried now. This wasn't like Ted. Usually he'd respond pretty quick. His phone always close by, like most people our age. I waited and awoke the next morning to a single cinnamon heart on my pillow. I know I didn't put it there and Katie hadn't come home that night. Could it have been Ted? But that would mean he was in my room. I tried and called him again. Went to the coffee shop. He still wasn't there. No one else seemed concerned. I went to his place and buzzed up. Again, no one answered. I waited until someone left his building so I could go myself. The place was quiet, eerily quiet, with no sounds coming from anywhere. I banged on his door. Still no answer. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I called the police and I told them I was afraid that something happened to Ted. When they arrived at the building, I told them about the notes, how we started dating. I showed them to them. Even that last one that was left for me. I told them about how I was afraid because Ted hadn't been to work and no one has been able to get a hold of him. That he won't answer his phone, text or door. The police didn't seem too interested. They said he was probably avoiding me because of the notes, or that they would check it out and make sure he was alright. They tried to knock themselves. They tried to call him. Nothing. They got in touch with his boss and to confirm he hadn't called into work, and then contacted his parents to confirm they hadn't spoken to him. With that, they were able to get the building manager to let them in to check his place. The officer told me to stay back. I couldn't though. Once he walked in, I followed. I needed to know what was going on. Everything in me told me something wasn't right here. Aside from the officer's footsteps, the place was silent. So very quiet. When the officer gasped from the bedroom, it made every hair on my body prickle and stand at attention. I ran over. The officer yelled for me to stay back. I didn't listen. I couldn't listen. There was Ted, very clearly not okay, hanging in his room. I went to the station to be questioned after that. They showed me the note that was left on his bed. I'm sorry, with a single cinnamon heart. The picture of that letter of that heart, it broke me. They ruled it a suicide. I couldn't understand it. Why would he do that? I know now it wasn't one though. I got another letter today. I went to class hoping to keep my mind off of everything. I can't afford to fall behind. I sat alone. Wendy wasn't there. It was a bit of a relief because I didn't feel like talking to anyone. At the end of class, another friend we hang out with sometimes walked up to me and told me Wendy had left something for them to give to me. That she was sorry she couldn't be here to give it to me herself. They told me she had suddenly dropped out of school. Some sort of family emergency. No one will get in the way of us, Valentine. When I brought the note to the police, they looked into Wendy, but all they could say was that no one named Wendy went to my school and hadn't in a few years. That whoever I sat beside in class must not have been using her real name. That or she wasn't actually enrolled. They haven't been able to track her down. New notification from Instant Valentine. My teachers used to force us to exchange love notes. We were given lists of everyone in the class and made to spend money on themed boxes of cards with uncomfortably personal sayings. Be mine, someone like you. You're so pretty. I love you so much. The idea was to be anonymous in our delivery. But when 25 kids are all stumbling over each other in a room meant to handle 15, it's not exactly a discreet process. Some kids went home with lollipops expertly fashioned to the cards. A few enthusiastic parents made goodie bags with Pez dispensers and colored paper, sacrifices to the elite of our class. One kid, always one kid, never got anything. Despite the lists and the rules against discrimination, and the fact that she was always nice to everyone, there was always one desk left horribly, obviously bare. I always told myself I didn't mind. But that was elementary school, when the ultimate display of affection was pushing each other on the swings. And at some point down the line, people discovered how to order bouquets of roses and perfected the art of making out in full view of everyone except the teachers. I guess cars are sort of obsolete, but people get other things. Mostly fluffy, button-eyed things with bows like nooses around their necks. The fact that those things never used to make it to me is my own fault. I know that. I know I should be more outgoing, or prettier, or just better. But it's more comforting to blame everyone else instead. That's the kind of mood I was in. Early last week, when I was sitting on my polka dot bed, scrolling through frilly websites complete with gifs of dogs chewing heart-shaped treats. Not because I was bitter or anything, just that Valentine's Day was coming up, and I had to do a love letter for creative writing. Fishing for inspiration even if resentment was the only fish biting. I clicked a random link and a brightly colored interface popped up. It was a flat red with a few sparse graphics, a title and a button beaming, "Sign up today." A character was paused on the bottom of the screen, looking up at the button. It was impossible to tell if it was a baby or a child. Its head was swollen out and up, with a minuscule torso and 4 fat limbs. Tufts of blonde hair swooped over huge blue eyes, and everything about it, from its blue clothes to its red skin, was grossly oversaturated. The title was Instant Valentine. Curious, I hovered over the sign up button, not really sure what I was expecting. Part of me thought it was going to be a joke. That text would flash, calling me a loser, and somehow add me to a public spreadsheet of how many others had clicked the link. I clicked it anyway, but instead a phone popped up, asking for an email and name. Bad as this is going to sound, I never really cared about giving away my email to sites like this. I did it often enough at malls to get Wi-Fi, and with those sketchy grade saver websites, I figured as long as I never put my real name, I wasn't really giving anything up. Now I know better. I typed in my email and an alias I spent 30 seconds choosing. Gwen. It's the name I used to wish I had, from when Ben 10 was my favorite show in the world. A minute later, I got a notification and checked my email, again expecting an advert or punchline. I've transcribed it here. To Gwen, you liked my life. Be mine. There was no sender. The email was just a site name and string of numbers. I opened the attachment and found a drawing of a little girl holding a candle. It looked like the first mascot, too red and lumpy, like those vintage cherub kids. Some kind of gushy mailing list. Cool. I closed the email and went on to bed a while later, secretly excited by the digital admirer. This was last week. The next morning I checked my email again, and there was another note from Instant Valentine. Gwen, you look so sweet enough to eat. Be my Valentine. Attached was another old-timey drawing of a girl sitting in a comically large cauldron, an open fire beneath. I know it's dumb, but something about the notes was reassuring. There was something to look forward to, for one, but there were also windows into another world, Gwen's world. The notes kept coming. All of them came with drawings, increasingly saturated. A pirate shoving a gooey hook through a girl's heart. Let's hook up, girl. Be mine. A Betty Boop type with a rubber nose, horse legs, and a melting pile around her. Bright flames eating away her skin. You're hot stuff, Valentine. Be mine. A little devil holding a pitchfork with hearts at the tips. All his expression was twisted with pain, and the horns and tail looked surgically attached. I love you from hell and back. Be mine. At first the art was charming in a weird way. Stuff you'd find in a garage sale or an attic. But as the weeks progressed, they only got more graphic. I tried to Google the pictures by description, hoping to find the artist, and came up empty. I Googled instant Valentine. Nothing relevant. I couldn't even find the original site anymore. And I didn't remember the random series of clicks that got me there in the first place. But I wasn't too worried, more curious than anything. I didn't even realize how much I enjoyed the daily acknowledgement until some girls from class asked if I even had a boyfriend yet. As I walked away from them, I wondered why I'd said yes. The days passed. I started filing out Gwen's world a bit. I imagined her as a perfect version of me, taller, smoother skin, a smile like Gatsby, and a voice like Daisy. Gwen was confident, and everyone wanted to be her Valentine. I even created a persona for the note giver. I called him Josh, and he grew inside my head as a shy, artsy kid who had been in love with Gwen since they were kids. Love you, dear. Be mine. Gwen's friends recoiled from the bloated carcass of a girl, wearing a sexy deer costume, painted across the page where she knew it was special. I gained another reason to hate Valentine's Day. I knew the notes would probably stop then, but sometime in the last few days, the notes started to change. They stopped being addressed to Gwen and started being addressed to me. I spent an hour trying to find out how it knew my name. My lame conclusion was that it could read other emails in my inbox, although I'm still not sure. The thought chilled me, but there wasn't a way to cancel the subscription. I couldn't even reply to the email, so I did nothing, waiting for the issue to resolve itself. The cheesy pickup lines thinned out, replacing them with constant emails, several per day, with just 2 words. Be mine? Be mine! Be mine! The drawings were still there, but they were wrong somehow, like the ink was running. Smudged and blackened faces screamed at me from my computer screen. All these different girls. One was wearing a bikini or underwear, and her head was submerged in a bathtub. Another chubbier girl had on a pink costume and was roasting over a spit with an apple between her lips. Those things had been okay in Gwen's world, but now they were real, threatening. I need you to know that I wanted to show someone, friends or parents even. I need you to know that I tried, but I couldn't bring myself to. The embarrassment would have crushed me. And I think maybe there was still a tiny part, a sick and shriveled thing just under my skin, living in my fingertips and between my hips, that wanted to keep it a secret. Wanted to have something all my own. And maybe that part of me was glad to see my name grace the screen, because just as quickly as I'd created Gwen, I started to resent her. I need you to know this because I deserve it. There's always a new girl in the drawings. They're getting worse. I can hear their screams. Today is Valentine's Day, and I'm sitting alone in the cafeteria, surrounded by red things, fluffy, lacy things. Everyone has a rose. The office is giving them away so no one will feel left out. I didn't pick one up. I had to write this down. I just checked my email again. Happy Valentine's Day. Let's tie the knot. The picture is in that same ridiculous style, but the ink looks fresh and the lines are sharp. The girl has ugly brown hair pulled into pigtails, and she's sitting on a polka dot bedspread. Heavy ropes crisscross her body. There's tape over her mouth, but she doesn't look afraid. My mum just called me, saying I need to come home. She said she was picking me up. I can see her car through the windows. The person inside is not my mother. An office aide is walking around the cafeteria with a green slip looking for me. To send me away, only a matter of time now. The bed in the drawing looks like my bed. The girl in the drawing is wearing my clothes. I wish I was afraid. The office aide is making eye contact, walking towards me. The car outside is honking. A girl is crying over spilling her chocolates. There are roses in the garage bin. Mascara is running, but I'm not. I should be afraid. Happy Valentine's Day. Do not open until Valentine's Day. Reddit, I need your help. Every year around February, I get like this. My appetite is absent. My thoughts become cluttered. I have to take a week off from work just to cope with the anxiety. Every year, a day or two before Valentine's Day, I get mailed an envelope from my daughter. They are always titled the same. Do not open until Valentine's Day, and contain a piece of ripped paper with an image printed on them. I always wait until Valentine's Day to open them, and that day is approaching fast. This year will be the 14th year in a row she has mailed one. The only problem is my daughter disappeared 14 years ago. It all started when my daughter Riley was 8. Her mother and I just divorced, and it was nasty. We hated each other. I'll admit I can be stubborn sometimes, but according to her, every bad thing that happened was my fault. Her finger was always pointed at me. There were so many nights Riley couldn't sleep because of my yelling. Looking back, the divorce was in our best interest, especially Riley's, but still. I can't imagine how difficult it was for Riley, watching her mother and I drift apart. My lawyer was expensive, but worth it when joint custody was granted. My marriage was terrible, but it brought the flower of the world into my life, Riley. Arrangements were made for each of us to keep Riley 2 weeks at a time, and both of us living in the same school district made transport easy. Having to deal with a crazy mother on occasion was a pain in the butt, but well worth it to see my girl. As she grew up, her curiosity astonished me and opened my eyes to things you miss as an adult. She loved trips to the zoo, pushing her doll in a stroller and swinging. I taught her how to ride a bike with no training wheels, and she taught me how to appreciate endless hours of Disney movies. My favorite times with Riley were holidays. My side of the family treated her like a princess, and she soaked up the attention like a sponge. We always had so much fun playing games or exploring outside. She loved spending holidays with me, but usually didn't get to. Her overbearing mother caused a stir if Riley wasn't with her side of the family for holidays, and I usually didn't put up a fight. I knew to pick my battles carefully. Since she couldn't see me on most major holidays, she started mailing me things. She was sad I couldn't see her on Thanksgiving or Christmas, so she would cut out funny images she saw in a newspaper magazine or the internet and mail them to me a few days before the holiday. She always titled the envelopes with "Do not open until insert holiday." She started enjoying her little college projects, and I started receiving them on New Year, Halloween, 4th of July, and Valentine's Day. The next time she would come over, she asked if I waited until the actual holiday to open them, which I always did. It was a fun way for us to get around the 2-week rule. I started putting all of our envelopes and cutouts into a bin. I've held on to each and every one. She was my little angel that could instantly put me in a good mood. Her body may have been small, but her heart was large enough for the two of us. I don't know how she turned out so caring after all the shiz her mother and I put her through. But God, I cared for her so much. One morning, I was woken by an authoritative knock at my door. The police eagerly searched my home and questioned me for hours, but I was more confused than helpful. I lost my shiz when they said Riley was missing. I sucked up my pride to join my ex-wife in helping the police any way we could. The search began immediately. The Amber Alert had already been issued, and the whole community searched for my little angel. She has never been found. After getting my ex-wife's, neighbors, and others' testimony, the police pieced together their best assumption as to what happened. The report said Riley waited at the end of the driveway for the school bus. Her mother let Riley stand by herself while getting ready for work. The next time she looked for Riley, she was gone, and suspected the bus had picked her up and she was on the way to school. The bus driver said she never saw Riley that day. When the school called my ex-wife about Riley's absence an hour later, the police were called. Over the next few days, tips came in, but nothing substantive. As the attention faded, so did the help. As the help faded, so did my optimism. When the police called off the search 2 weeks later, I smashed the F out of my bedroom drywall in a rage. I had a phase where I blamed my ex-wife for being irresponsible. I had a binge drinking phase. Hell, I even had a suicidal phase that went so far as a pistol purchase. The light of my life had been extinguished by some random perv or effing maniac abductor. Nothing helped ease the pain, and that following year crept by slowly. Then I received an envelope. Startled by the writing, I dropped it on the ground when I read the front. Do not open until Valentine's Day. The handwriting was shockingly familiar, and even the apostrophe was missing, something she always forgot. I lost it. Tears streamed down my face while I sobbed harder than I had in my life. My sorrow quickly turned to anger when I realized what happened. Someone was playing the sickest joke imaginable. and I had to find out who. I called my ex-wife, but she brushed off my anger as pathetic. I called a few friends who might have known something, but no one did. When I finally opened the envelope, the only thing it contained was a small torn piece of paper with a printed image of a monkey. After calming my rage and getting my wits about me, I threw everything into a plastic bag to take to the police. Did one of her letters get trapped in the mail only to be sent a year later? Is it a cruel joke? Is her abductor taunting me? Is Riley alive? None of my questions were answered after they analyzed the mail. No fingerprints, no fibers, no DNA, nothing. The only helpful information I received was since there was no stamp or return address, that someone put it in the mailbox personally. After 6 months of testing the envelope and monkey image was returned to me, I put it in the box with the rest of Riley's gifts. The event was so peculiar it never left my mind. I spent hours going over possible scenarios of her disappearance and how one of her gifts got to me a year late. I spent that year a recluse from my family and friends while trying to make sense of what happened. My heart needed to heal alone. On February the 12th, the following year, another envelope came. It had the same handwriting and title, "Do not open until Valentine's Day." I didn't get upset. Somehow it gave me peace. I followed the instruction and 2 days later opened it. A small piece of paper with an orange on it was inside. I put it in with the others. This has continued for the last 13 years. 14 if one comes this year. The first 4 envelopes carried images of a monkey, an orange, a mailbox, a mouse. After 4 unsuccessful attempts, in 4 years the police could not find any information. Every year I brought them my newest gift, and every year they told me no evidence was found. They knew it was odd for me to get letters the same time every year, but since they were not threatening, they couldn't do much else. They advised I ignore them since it could be a prank. After the 4th year, I stopped showing them. The next year, I was mailed images of a yo-yo, a kite, an igloo. A few months after I received the cut out of the igloo, I was called about Riley's disappearance. A young college filmmaker wanted to do a low-budget documentary on her disappearance and asked permission from me. Publicity could only help Riley's situation, so I agreed. The interview was difficult, but the college kid was accommodating enough to interview my ex-wife on a different occasion. I never mentioned the envelopes. After it was released online, the cops got a few more tips, but nothing materialized. The next February, I set up a camera to record my mailbox. I wanted to catch the person in the act. However, after getting another envelope, I searched the footage to find an error had occurred. The last 12 hours were just static. This new envelope gave me a rush while opening it. It was like Riley was still talking to me. Sure, I had doubts, but sometimes the only thing keeping a man sane are his delusions. The handwriting was still the same. It was still Riley's. The envelope's image was of a lemur. I continued living my life. I've had a construction job for 9 years now that pays well and keeps the hours consistent. My girlfriend lives with me and she is great, but I have kept the gifts from Riley a secret. Even my ex-wife doesn't know about them. When asked why I take off around Valentine's Day, I just tell everyone it's in honor of my daughter. The next 2 years brought in large images. The thick folded pieces were glossy, like from a nice magazine. They were a light bulb and an elephant. I continued saving all the gifts. Every year was like a present from Riley. My assumption of a prank faded years ago, knowing no one would keep this up that long. The next 3 years brought envelopes containing a dog, a mop, a ear or earring. Here's the envelope and ear or earring cut out from last year. The last 13 years have been a hard battle to fight. Not knowing where Riley is or if she is even still alive eats at my soul. I managed the pain as best I could, but these damn envelopes bring it all back. I have no idea why anyone would do this as a prank, but I equally can't believe it's anyone other than Riley. Every year my mailbox camera malfunctions, goes blank, or is consumed with static the day I receive the envelopes. I have no proof that someone is messing with me, and it drives me crazy. Would anyone really torment me this long? Riley would be 22 now, and I'm sure just as sweet as when she was taken from me. Valentine's Day is approaching, and the anxiety has been reaching out for guidance. I can't make sense of the situation, so I'm asking for any help or solutions to this strange puzzle.